One of the things that sometimes happens, actually often happens, when a particularly bad retraction comes out, something that sort of really should have been caught by peer reviewers, or that a lot of people seem to think should have been caught by peer reviewers. And here I mean sort of obvious duplication of images or obvious splicing of gels that shouldn't have happened, is that journal editors will sort of go on a little bit of a tirade and say, peer review isn't designed to catch that. It's not designed to catch out-and-out fraud. It's not designed to catch, certain kinds of problems in papers. One of these days, and now that I'm on camera, I'm really going to have to sort of go through with this promise that I keep making. One of these days, I'm going to catalog all of the things that journal editors say peer review isn't meant to catch. In fact, this could be a project for Peer Review Watch. And if by the time you took that whole list together, you would be left with essentially nothing. You would be left with some sort of vague check that the conclusions are more or less in whatever language they're published in, and you can read them. And I'm being sort of deliberately a little bit tough there, but really the question is, what is peer review good for? The fact that retractions happen doesn't mean that peer review is broken. You could argue the opposite, because some of the peer review does have to take place after papers are published. You can't possibly have all of these experts. You don't have as many experts as you would need to really peer review all these papers adequately. And some retractions are due to out-and-out fraud that probably can't be caught in traditional pre-publication peer review. I think that's changing. I think a lot of the things that people are talking about, they're doing sort of p-hacking and sort of trying to figure out how reasonable it is, how likely it is that particular results happen. It isn't necessarily happening in the peer review process, but it could, or at least it could be run through an algorithm. Someone like Yuri Simonson is doing a lot of this work in psychology, for example. So the question becomes, what is peer review good for? War, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. I don't think we're there. But what is peer review good for? I think it is a good filter. I think it is a good check on things. But to give it the sort of exaggerated prominence and the sort of gold standard, the sort of good housekeeping seal of approval that I think a lot of journals would like us to put on it. And by the way, they'll deny that too if you ask them, but they'll also say, please don't write about anything before it's peer reviewed. So one of the ways to think about peer review and how good it is or how useful it is to paraphrase Winston Churchill, as appropriate since I'm sitting here in the Royal Society in London. And he said about democracy that it's the absolute worst form of government except for every other one that we've tried. Or he said something like that. I'm paraphrasing already. You could think about peer review as absolutely the worst way to judge the merits and the sort of quality of papers except for every other one we've tried. The other one that I think people are starting to try more and more, which has always been around but hasn't really been instituted in a formal way and certainly hasn't been incentivized in any kind of way, is post-publication peer review. And that just means adding to the pre-publication peer review process. It doesn't mean sort of getting rid of pre-publication peer review, which a lot of people seem to think. And it also isn't a terribly new idea. Scientists have been writing letters about studies forever. They've been criticizing studies forever. They've been having journal club forever. One of the things that's amazing is if you ever sit down with scientists at their journal club, they rip studies to shreds. There's nothing left by the time they're done, and they know that someone in another lab is doing the same thing to their work. But none of that's ever public. No one ever talks about it. No one ever, says that this is what we said in journal club. Maybe they do if the paper's retracted. And one of the things you hear often is, everyone knew that paper was crap, so no one cited it. Well, if everyone knew it was crap, then why did it take 3 years or 10 years for it to be retracted? That speaks to the sort of lack of transparency in journals. It also speaks to the real lack of willingness of some journal editors in some fields to really correct the scientific record. But as to peer review, I think it's here to stay, and it should stay. But it should be scrutinized, as Peer Review Watch is doing and as other people are doing. And it should just be, we should add to it. We should not sort of do away with the current system, but just add to it. And that would also reflect how science works. It would mean that we are looking at science as a process rather than as a goal. One of the things we heard today at UKCSJ was from Chris Chambers was, let's not judge science based on the results. Let's judge science based on, the findings, and again, not the results, but the way that it works, how reproducible it is. because we have such an over-reliance on judging science by results that we end up just incentivizing the wrong things. And so it's hard to imagine, even if peer review is perfect, whether if you just put garbage in, you're going to somehow get, molten gold out. You're just going to get garbage. And I think we need to just come to terms with that. Science needs to come to terms with that. I can only, as an outsider, critique and report on things and investigate things. But science needs to figure out something that will be better so that trustworthiness improves. Because if the public's trust in science declines, then of course funding will decline. And I don't think anyone really wants that. Maybe some members of Congress in my home country do. But other than that, no one really wants that. People want to see science succeed and improve and grow. And the problem is that when science acts as if there aren't any problems in it, when science acts as if there isn't any fraud, that reproducibility is not a problem, when problems come to light, where they always will, they just always do, science becomes even less trusted by the public because they were told just last month or last year that there were no problems. Whereas if science says, look, peer review is not perfect, scientific integrity has a bit of an issue, we're working on that, here's what we're doing to try and fix it, you would have much more trust in science. But that's up to scientists to figure out.